Hey everybody, it's Jason Grimm here, Cisco CloudCenter Architect, with a quick video today on um, how to work with external services and what they are and how they're created. You might have seen another video where I did some S3 and EFS work, functions as lifecycle actions. Today we're going to be looking at an external service and what that means. So. S3 utils is what I've created. Let's look at how this was designed, and you'll notice here some of the normal properties are missing from a normal VM deployment. So there's not node initialization settings and things like that. External services are executed by CloudCenter in a container on the orchestrator. So they're really for spin up, spin down, quick functions. So something that CloudCenter needs to do or orchestrate or automate or manage or govern, but is not necessarily a VM. So an F5 load balancer, a Palo Alto, NetScaler, an Elastic load balancer. These are events and functions that CloudCenter handles, but it doesn't necessarily create a VM. It just needs to execute some code, so it does this in a container on the orchestrator. So this is the normal topology modeler. I've created a custom service that I've dragged out here to the palette. You'll notice some interesting things here too as well. Deployment parameters, and these things are inherited. So there's 5 things that I'm going to pass into the external service. Which is the function that needs to be completed, the bucket name, region, access key ID, and secret access key. So this one's a little bit different in that I'm creating one service that you then pass arguments to do multiple things. If you saw the other video, I basically broke out individual functions. So there was a day 2 lifecycle action for listing buckets or creating buckets or deleting buckets. The same thing with EFS. In this case, the route I took was to create one service that you would pass arguments to, and then it would do things. So if we go into the admin section and we go into services and take a look at the service itself, what you'll see at the top here in a minute are 3 options. You can run services on a VM with an agent, without an agent, or this external service is what I was talking about that runs in the container. Logo, file, name, description, all kind of common stuff. Category, that's just where it shows up in my application profiles. And so similar to the lifecycle action, I've got well, the lifecycle action was kind of a single action. Here, the concept of a service can have an update, start, stop, suspend, resume. Most often, really the only thing we're doing is starting. I haven't created or ran into a service yet that I wanted to keep running long term, and that service would have different behaviors for stopping or suspending or resuming. Not to say that use case doesn't exist. The functionality is certainly there. I just haven't run into it myself. Those parameters that you're seeing passed through into the application profile I've defined them here. And you'll see when we look at the code here in a minute that this is the parameter name that is variabilized and passed in. It's a list box. In this simple example, I've got, the user can choose list buckets, create buckets, or delete buckets, and are they required, are they optional? The bucket name, if you're doing a create or delete, that field is there for you to apply that. The region you want it to run in, and the access key, and the access key ID rather, and the secret access key as well. That's basically it. It's calling out to where I've got this hosted on one of my repos. I'll put this in the comments as well. But if we look at the code briefly here, you saw the other video. This was where I broke each function out, you'll notice just a couple of nuances. The nice thing is I can recycle uh, pretty much all of this code. When it runs in a VM, there's a different set of things that are sourced so that you can call on the CloudCenter variables. And again, this is just a single function for listing. This is all you need to call for the container. And that really is just when the container starts up, it's inheriting information about CloudCenter things that are passed to it, functions, variable names, and things like that. So normal description, like in the last one, I talked about what's being passed in, external versus internal vars, and I set up some variables here. And in this one, I'm still using the AWS CLI. I'll probably eventually make one that is just using the API, but in short, it goes through and installs some prerequisites, installs the CLI tools and configures them dynamically based on these the access key and ID that I'm passing in and building that CRUD file. And then I've got functions for listing, creating, and deleting. And here's where it gets a little bit different than a lifecycle action. So outside of the case, I'm installing the prereqs and the AWS CLI and configuring the CLI. And then in the service, probably didn't show you, but if you go to the end of this, I'm already passing it the start action. So it's automatically going to drop into the start function, or the start case rather. And then under the case, that function where I said, you could list buckets, create buckets, or delete buckets, it's reading that in, and based on that function, it's doing different things, right? So list, these are obvious, list, and then the create, just like the day 2 lifecycle action, I do a list, and then I do the create or delete, and then I list again, so you can see the difference. So that's the code. There's not a lot to it. I mean, a lot of it are echoes and comments and logging and things. You also notice that if you're creating a service, print log is the function to pass that to the log, versus in a VM, uses a different function that's in that logging message. So let's go ahead and we've looked at the service. We've looked inside the profile. There's really nothing else configured here. I did, just for fun, the basic information, I forced some tags for the aging policy and where I wanted to place it. I wanted to when I launch it, you could launch it anywhere, but I wanted to run it from Azure just to do S3 work in Amazon to show that was possible. But let's go ahead and launch this. So just like anything, give it a name. And you see it already inherited my aging tag and my deployment environment tag. And how this works is I'm basically telling it where I want it to run. Now I didn't lock those tags, so I could X out of these and choose additional tags as well if I wanted. Here's where those deployment parameters were brought in. I put a default function there. Actually, instead of doing a list, I'm going to do a delete because I know I've got one out there, and got that name out there that I knew was there. And then I put a drop-down list. You could just let this free form, but for the AWS region and S3, really, you don't even need this. I left it in there for EFS, but I really don't even care about the region when doing some of the S3 work. But then I'm going to put in my key and my secret. And again, I'm just using IDs and keys, and IAM works fine here as well. So that's it. I've told it where to go and what I want it to do, and this should be fun on the video. I did a create. I haven't tested the delete yet, but I'm betting that it's going to work fine. Limited to Azure intentionally. Go ahead and hit deploy. While it's deploying, I'll go and double check my code. So create. I mean, here's the binary, and I pass this into the log, which can be handy. You can actually echo out exactly what command's being run, and that variable looks fine. And list, print, delete, list. Okay, it should work fine. Let's see. Now with the service, you get a independent thing that can be ran by itself, and the way it's designed here, we've write one script or function and pass multiple things to it. The lifecycle actions are actually a little bit faster, but the drawback there is that you've got to go into the VM context to run that. I'll actually pull that up here while we're waiting. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here I can see the parameters that were passed. These things, instead of using a string or a list or text area, of course, you always want to use a password field for stuff like that. And it's starting. Here's my logging coming in. It's starting the service. It's installing the tools. Would run faster again if I just eventually we'll probably just do the API call. And change its refresh actually. 30 seconds is fine. And okay, well it's already done. So well, there's 2 pages now. I'll just go to the second page, but so it's starting. Installed the, you know what? Just 2 minutes. Let's go back down here. So it starts the service, installs prereqs. jQuery, this container, it was not a brownfield VM, so it obviously wasn't there. Installed jQuery or JSON query. Installed the tools and configured them. And the first thing it did was list the buckets. I went into this more in the other video, but it by default just puts it out in JSON format. And the reason I grabbed JSON query there was to walk through some of that stuff, which was to create the make this a little bit more readable format, which is the in a table format. So I can see. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the list that it ran before. That was my bucket, S3 bucket 001. It performed the delete. I should probably put another print log in there. And the second listing, voila, there is no more S3 bucket. So I am going to write this for EFS as well, and then convert it over to just API calls and see if that speeds things up. So that's all I've got for you today. I will post I'll post the links to the where I've got this out here on GitHub and well, it's not in my cache, but anyway, those are the raw. Okay, yeah, this is my private GitHub one, so it'll be out there. I'll post this link in the comments, but there's no guarantee that this will, stay in this form or always be out there. So if you're going to use it, just grab it and put it on your own repo. So this is just a dev repo, and I'll probably, once I get it to where I want it to be, I'll put it on the CloudCenter. I'll put it on our main CloudCenter repo as well, which is here. I'll post both of these links. I'll put it in services as S3 utils. All right, great. Thanks. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.